Welcome to Corporate Baggage, where we will help you unpack, repack, and lighten the load. We're your hosts, Whitney Siders and Catie Campbell.
For nearly 40 years, we've been coaches, consultants, and leaders inside organizations and supporting global enterprises and Fortune 500 companies to help make those organizations strong and healthy.
If there's a hot topic in the workplace, you better believe we'll be unpacking it here. Topics like return to office, performance reviews, compensation. Nothing is off limits. Like, subscribe, follow us, and drop your baggage in the comments so we can unpack it together and lighten the load.
The only thing that should be in your bag is your paycheck.
Welcome back to Corporate Baggage, where we will unpack, repack, and lighten the load each week with you. Today, we are staying on the topic of return to office, which we told you last time was really just a mask for a lot of other things going sideways in the business. And so today, we're going to talk about performance management, monitoring, and managing performance.
We are your hosts, Catie Campbell and Whitney Siders. We are coaches, consultants, and corporate baggage experts. So let's get into it.
Let's do it. Oh, and today, need a little energy.
A little sponsored by Uptime.
Yeah.
Love it.
Not yet. Cheers.
All right, let's dig in.
Performance management.
No.
I don't think I've ever met a leader or an employee that says, I love performance reviews.
I've only met one. His name is Tom Fox. He used to
Shout out Tom.
Shout out Tom. I worked with him years ago in Washington, D.C. He was the Washington Post columnist, the Fed coach. He's amazing. I learned so much from him. And he loved performance management. He is the one and only person that I know that would ever cop to that.
And so what I know to be true is the reason leaders and employees don't love performance reviews is one, it's extra work. And two, often comes with some surprises. At least from the employee perspective, they go in and they think, I've been crushing it all year, or I've been doing a good job, or I haven't heard that I'm not doing a good job. And then all of a sudden they get pummeled with all this feedback and or not get a raise and or not get the promotion they wanted. There's just complete misalignment across the board.
And I think what further complicates things like performance management, performance reviews, talent management, however you want to phrase it, because every HR, personnel, corporate structure has a different way to call it something else. But what is complicated, the entire idea or system around managing someone's performance or monitoring someone's performance, is the fact that now we have companies who've got employees who are working all over the globe. People have sometimes flexible arrangements. Sometimes they've got hybrid arrangements. We're also seeing where it's problematic that now we've got companies who are saying you have to return to office because we don't know what those employees are doing when they're at home or working on a beach somewhere. So we're going to bring them here, and that's how we're going to manage performance, which is really the most ass-backward way I can think of trying to understand what your employees are doing and how to better support them to get the optimal results, whatever it is you're trying to do in your organization. But here we are, and so this is our topic today.
It is. I mean, how often are we looking at activity and not outcomes? Like I hear that all the time when it comes to, and I'm not just talking about sales activity, like I'm talking about productivity, and even this is a little bit scary, is systems that are in place where employees don't even know that they're in place that are monitoring activity on their computers.
Well, okay, can we just be honest? Since we've had email and the internet, there have always been IT systems and structures behind the scenes that can see what you're doing.
Sure.
Anybody who is listening here, if you think for a second that the company you work for doesn't know that you're browsing for something interesting on Amazon to buy on your lunch break or whenever, you're wrong. If they think that they can't look in to see the email that you said that said, I don't really like what Whitney's hair looks like today, you're wrong. They can see your Slack messages. They can see all of your activity. Now, not every company turns that on. Not everybody has the capability to fund and have an IT team or even an outside company that monitors that, but they all have the capability of doing it. So let's just be honest. The ability to monitor has been there since we've had computers on our desks and it's been interconnected. Okay. So that's been before you or I were in the workplace. Thank you very much. Okay. So we are still on the younger side of things, but so the ability to monitor has always been there, but now companies are seeing it as more of a necessity for a number of reasons. One is if we just want to go in support of our IT friends that we've worked with historically, they're doing it from a risk perspective, right? They're trying to make sure that we're able to protect the company against cyber attacks and other kinds of external threats. But really the biggest threat that exists in companies is their employees. And so they do have to have systems and processes in place to make sure you don't have somebody going rogue on you and sending out company data that shouldn't be, exposing the company that they should be. But what it's evolved into, now that we're in this post-COVID environment where it's really important for companies to understand what their employees are doing. Before they decided to bring them back into the office, they started to put in place these different systems to say, like, when are you on Teams or when are you on Zoom or how active are you in your email? And some of that is just like table stakes and using some of the tools, the basic tools that almost every business works with, whether it's a G Suite thing or a Microsoft thing or something similar. But now they're being used and influences how managers and leaders will rate someone's performance based on your activity versus actual productivity or actual production of something of value for the company. Right.
I think that's the key word is production.
Production or value creation, because value creation is a very important set of terms that companies use to be able to evaluate somebody's worth to their enterprise.
Well, and it's not just how employees are being measured on their performance. It's also influencing how leaders are making decisions for the business. I was talking to an HR leader just last week who was saying, we're really having this problem at the moment, and I've been watching it and monitoring it, and it tends to be it's becoming a pattern where we're hearing our employees leveled up through leadership saying things like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm at capacity, I can't take on any more, things like that. So they're reacting in that way versus responding, because what they're then seeing in the data, because they're monitoring activity, is the activity has dropped. So they're then saying, well, activity has dropped, but you're saying you're too busy or busier than ever. Mm-hmm. So that's creating this conundrum for leaders to question employees, which is never a place that you want to be. And that gets back to things we've talked about before in terms of trust, visibility, all of those things. But if we bring that back to activity and outcomes, if we're only looking at activity to make decisions, to review people, you're going to continue to butt heads there. You just will. Because you're not going to have the same, again, you're just not clear on what you're after together. Because if you're after activity, fine. That's a different thing.
There's a company that I'm working with right now that is really trying to investigate how to up-level their entire sales team. It's a great project. And one of the things that they're doing is they're looking at how their salespeople engage with their customers. And so the head of the company I know is looking at the data that they can see and saying, okay, well, Whitney sends 10 emails a day and Catie sends 30 emails a day. So Catie must be more productive. But the reality might be that your activity in your 10 emails is actually more productive because you end up closing more deals than I do. So what they're trying to do is make decisions on people's performance and their value to the company based on activity versus the quality and value that they're actually creating within the company. And so we are going to get to root cause of what's really going on to also then see maybe Catie needs a little bit of help in her sales process or how she writes or communicates to people, her timeliness. And maybe you need to be studied to say, how is she landing more deals than anybody else? But she seems to be doing a third of the activity as everyone else. So we have all these great tools and resources to be able to monitor things, but it's really not necessarily telling us what it is that we need to know in terms of who is really producing the things that we need to promise to our customers or shareholders or anything else like that.
Sounds like an elementary school math problem. If Catie sends 10 emails and Whitney sends 30 emails. And so we're just getting back to if you're focused on activity only, that won't solve your problem. That won't actually tell you much, except it will drive the wrong behaviors. It'll drive the wrong behaviors because in that example, let's just stay on that for a second. Catie sends 30 emails, Whitney sends 10 or whatever it was, right? And so if we're then saying emails is the thing that you're being measured on and you need to send 50 a day and you keep sending the emails that aren't landing you the business, that's not helping anyone. Instead of, like you said, understanding what is the outcome we're after, one, making that clear, and then two, understanding what's the activity that's actually contributing to that, and then training on that. That's a way different approach to performance, not just monitoring, but management and development.
Well, here's what you and I both know. We have worked in dozens of organizations together on this very specific topic around what high performance looks like and how we know or can help a company better understand how to drive high performance in a particular role or a particular area of their business. And so, as you were saying, we go in and help companies figure out what are the outcomes that this employee or this role is supposed to produce. What is the activity? What are the behaviors? What are all the inputs that need to happen in order to produce that outcome? And then how do we measure people against that sort of benchmark to then understand, okay, well, it's clear that Whitney is doing something that Catie is not because she's closing more deals, but she's sending out less messages. So it might be that Catie needs more training in a specific area, and we need to put Whitney in a mentoring role or maybe a supervisory or a managerial role in some capacity because she's cracked the code in a way that nobody else has. I mean, you and I have done this for how many organizations now and how many different roles? Because what we keep finding is these companies are trying to manage or measure performance, and they can't even clearly define what it is that you're supposed to be producing that is of value to the company. So we go in and we help them figure out what are the outcomes that we're driving towards, not what's the activity. So right now we've got all these tools that are measuring the activity, and it's a fool's errand because it's not really giving us the direction that we need to know. Is Catie or Whitney more successful? Because on paper, I look way more successful than you. Right. But in reality, you're the better salesperson because you're landing the deals.
And at the end of the day, the employee shouldn't be saying, I know I'm successful when my customer's not upset. That's not a measure of success. Sure, an outcome is happy customers.
That's right.
What does that really mean? And so I can't I've heard that a ton of times, which is nobody's upset, so I had a good week. That's not going to get you to the next level. That's not going to drive next level results for the company. So also it makes me think back to organizations that we've worked with that are doing really well that want to do better. So we were just talking about this earlier, is there's a lot of companies that aren't doing well, but if they're both saying we need help, that company is going to thrive because they're then saying, I'm able to be aware, I'm able to see what's happening and make plans against it. And I think that's the same for employees. They need to understand in the review process, hey, here's what's working specifically. Mm-hmm. Here's what I need to change specifically. And then how am I going to do that from a developmental standpoint, not just do better, not just do better next time, hit your numbers next time.
Okay, but then, so all this makes sense. And you and I think when I was a baby consultant, like 100 years ago, but a baby consultant, we've been in the business collectively for about 40 years, right? In and out of organizations, talking about all these levels, different leadership and management topics, and performance management, monitoring performance, whatever, has been a topic well before COVID. When we both jumped into the workforce, we were in these roles that we were helping to uncover the best ways to be able to reward, recognize people, promote people, and support and develop people, right? This has been our bread and butter for a long time. And now that work that we've been doing historically has been complicated by this narrative that's coming out that it really is not positive in a post-COVID environment.
Yeah.
After we allowed people to go and work from home, we gave people a lot of flexibility. There's so many companies right now that are saying, no, we need to rein people back in and they need to return to office. Now, and these are big companies. It's the Walmarts, Amazons, Apples, Nike, Salesforce, Meta, Salesforce, which always cracks me up. Like everything you do is remote, but okay, whatevs. So we're bringing everyone back in. And one of the reasons why they will publicly say we want people to come back is so that we can see what they're doing, so we can better manage performance, so we can better support people. And I think
we can train.
Sure. Okay. So we can't do that virtually, but we can do all of that when we're in person together. And I don't know about you, but I've never heard of a worse or more lame excuse for why somebody should return to office than I just need to be able to see what you're doing. I mean, all it makes me think of is those scenes from Office Space from like 100 years ago, right? Where you've got the boss that's like creepily hanging over the cubicle like, hey, how you doing? It's almost like, I mean, it's why the show The Office is so funny, with Michael Scott going out and interacting with people, interrupting their workday, and like literally looking over their shoulder to see what they're doing, which is insanely disruptive.
It's a cop-out. It's a cop-out for the lack of leadership skills. And unfortunately, and I'm not calling out leader because I don't think it's their fault. Because we're talking about here in this specific instance, it's a lot of middle managers, which we talk about all the time is the hardest leadership position.
Hardest.
The middle manager. And whatever that looks like in your organization. And we have it, if you think about traditionally, leaders in their positions are there because they were most likely really good at their individual contributor role and were never properly trained as in a leadership role. And if we think about where we are now, roll back 5-ish years ago, and then entering into the pandemic, you had leaders that were either catapulted into the role and then in a totally different environment, or only managing remotely. So we're not setting them up for success. But at the end of the day, what's visible is they don't have the skills to manage remotely or in a hybrid environment. So instead of saying, we're going to invest in that proper development for our organization, for our leaders, we just need to see people. We just need to be able to monitor them and frankly, micromanage.
It's literally hitting the easy button. This is the Staples click, easy button of how we're managing people is I need to be able to see them, and then I'll be able to evaluate their performance. When in reality, the majority of people who are in the general workforce are not in roles that you can see them doing anything other than working on a computer.
Right.
Running spreadsheets, in databases, sending emails. I mean, I guess you could sit over my shoulder and look and see how I write an email, but you could also just see that virtually too. Like, I don't need to be in front of you. There are roles where you do have to be in front of customers. There's retail, restaurant, food and beverage, all that kind of stuff. So we're construction, right. We're not discounting that, but it's all of the other roles that don't require that. It makes zero sense. So they're hitting the easy button. They're bringing people back in. And I know for a fact that the majority of the companies that are enacting those policies are not doubling down on, okay, well, now we're really going to figure out how to manage, monitor performance, really pour into people and develop them. They're like, no, now we're just going to watch and see what you're doing when you're physically in front of us.
They're doing the same thing they were at home, just in the office. And it's the cover of, well, you're in office, so now I could train you better.
100%. But we know that that's not what's happening.
It's another check the box that I hate. It's such a thorn in my side around, well, if we do this, then it'll all be better. If we do this, it'll all be better. There is no actual magic pill in anything in life, especially in the workplace. And if you want to enact true change, which every organization is going to need some sort of change, unless you're completely building it from the ground up and you're helping and you're shaping that correctly from the beginning, you're still going to have challenges. But unless you're starting there, you have issues. Again, you could be you could be at the top of your game in terms of revenue. You could be at the top of your game in terms of people knocking down your door for talent. And do you think, whether you hate or love Tom Brady, he's great at what he's great at what he does. Excellent, right? Do you think he had a coach?
He had many coaches. He had all the coaches.
Do you think he had routines?
He had all the
Do you think-
routines.
like, the best of the best want to get better all the time. And so those are the types of companies that I see really trying new things, trying to experiment in this new environment.
I think you said something really powerful a little bit ago that I want to reinforce, which is there was no roadmap for a lot of people during the pandemic about going from fully in the office into fully remote. And then even as it moved to hybrid, and a lot of workforces were hybrid at that time too, right? So there wasn't a roadmap for a lot of industries, for a lot of companies. We also know, because we've been brought in to help support this over the years, that a lot of companies historically do not invest in their managers, especially when they make them a manager, they promote them into the role, or a team lead role, or even just a project lead role. They don't give them the proper education on how do you lead people, how do you communicate, what effective collaboration looks like. How do you set expectations? How do you hold people accountable? How do you give proper feedback? Like, all of these are inputs and elements to what we call performance management, right? And I know that we can both err on the side of critical for a lot, for basically everything. But the reality is, most of the people who are leading in the workforce today, I will say they weren't raised right as a child, but not as a baby kid when they were in, elementary school. They weren't raised right properly in leadership and management. They were put into a role. They were kind of shoved off to the deep end of the pool and said, don't drown, and don't let those other people around you drown either. Mm-hmm. Which is, it is the most unfortunate part of working in business, when you start working with the leader who is well-intentioned, they're bright, they're capable, they do have a heart for people, but they don't know even the basic blocking and tackling. And so they rely on ill-formed, ill-structured systems and processes that sometimes HR puts out, sometimes just a random company puts out. And it turns into confusion. So then we're at the place now where it's like, well, the only way that we can tell what you're doing and how effective you are in your role is to look at you from our little corporate offices into your cubicle farm. That's the only way that we're going to be able to manage or monitor your performance.
So inspiring.
It is very inspiring. It makes you want to go back into corporate America.
It's real. I mean, I do. And that's why employees and leaders alike don't love conducting performance reviews. And at the end of the day, if you have some of those systems in place, starting with understanding what those outcomes are, what winning, what good really looks like, if you have that, and you're having regular one-on-one connections with your people, those performance reviews do then tend to be helpful progress tracking. They're documenting the progress. It's less of what is the actual conversation, and it's more confirmation of what you've been talking about all year, which makes the conversation a lot more fun, usually more celebratory, and typically more of a quick review and more of a forward-looking. Okay, great. Let's confirm everything we've talked about all year. What are we moving forward and doing? How can I help you be better? How can you help the organization achieve these goals? Here's where you plug in. That conversation is much more exciting than, oh, you messed up. Surprise, you're not getting a raise.
It's also more exciting than as a leader or a manager looking at activity reports and trying to make sense of that. Who needs a promotion or a raise? Who needs a development opportunity? Who needs a lot of help? Who needs to be exited from the organization?
Right.
I
Those
can't do
people
that.
are costing you a lot of money.
A ton of money. I mean, for the larger the company is, the number goes up exponentially.
Not only are those people, when I say those people, let's define that. The people who are underperforming.
Yes.
That are typically, and I'm not talking about the people who are not showing up to work. I'm talking about the people who are trying, but maybe they're in the wrong role, or maybe they're not set up for, whatever it is, they're not performing. They're costing you a lot of money hanging on to them, not just through performance and activity, but through morale and all of those things. And double, triple that for hiring someone and replacing them. But then you're replacing them, still not having the systems in place. So back to this theme of, let's not solve for the symptom, let's solve for the root cause. So if I keep doing the things that I'm experiencing problems with i.e., I have problems with performance, so I'm just going to replace them. No, you don't have problems with performance. You have problems with the systems that support performance.
Yeah.
And so let's solve that instead of you wasting your money on hiring the wrong people and then onboarding them and then developing them, wasting your time, money, and energy.
And it's a total demotivator for people when they're being held to standards that are ill-formed or really not even codified properly. I mean, we know that the 3 things that motivate anybody to do anything intrinsically, not money and benefits and things outside, right? But intrinsically, why you show up and do the things that you do. It's 3 things. Autonomy, right? I want to be self-directed. I want to do what I want to decide how I'm going to go about what I'm going to do. The second is mastery. It's getting better at something. So this whole performance management stuff that we're talking about is rooted in psychology of how human beings are intrinsically motivated to do things, to do discretionary work,
Yeah, motivated.
And the third piece of it is feeling connected, feeling like they're a part of something. And when you have the right systems and processes in place, you are connected to the ecosystem of people that are being developed, of a company that's moving business and progress along. That feels really good. Like, you don't have to get that good feeling just by working at a nonprofit. You can get that good feeling being in a system that is properly formed to like really tap into that intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, that's so true. And when we think about performance, it's not, I want to expand this a little bit. It's not just about the performance outcomes. It's also about how we show up as people. And we often see, I mean, how many times have you seen values on a wall, in an office, on a website, and then nobody ever talks about them? And so that's also a really key way that I think is often missed, is how do we measure our people not just on performance, but how they show up that contributes to that, the behaviors that are needed. Because I know I've seen a lot of this, and maybe listeners know some of these people, is you have someone that is crushing it at the results and they're an awful person to be around. But do they stick around? Are they stay at the company? Nobody fires them. But do you know why? Well, they're bringing in money, but also there's no way to hold them accountable to living those values because they're not integrated into performance reviews and they're not held accountable.
Yeah, that's right. The first person that I ever had to fire, which I don't know, you have to be heartless to not remember that, because it's a big deal. Even if you're letting them go for a corporate violation or something like that. And this one was, but it wasn't wholly on performance. This person's performance was okay, wasn't great. They were like a C+ player, trending in the right direction, but did something that was extraordinarily counter to the values of the organization. And this organization was values driven. So that was like, there was no question across the leadership team, this person had to go. One company that I've had the pleasure of working with for several years now is Hazelden Construction. They're based in Denver, Colorado. And they have really great performance management systems and processes, like super mature. It's one of the best of the best of the best in the construction industry. They are a model organization. But what I love most about them is they filter everything through values and their core behaviors. And it's crystal clear. They are on the wall, but they're also in and out of every conversation you have around your performance. They're in and out of every conversation you have around promotion, development, succession planning, all of it. It is core to how they operate. So like, they build really amazing buildings and they make their customers and clients really happy. And they're great community partners in the communities where they build. But their claim to fame, more than anything else, is how they treat their people and how they hold them to those values and those standards of excellence. And when they do that, it's not a question of who belongs and who doesn't. It's not a question of will you get promoted or not. You know what the kind of the remit is. You know what you're supposed to be doing. And we had the pleasure of getting to work with Hazelden for a couple of years now. And that's what makes a great organization that can handle this crazy performance management stuff. It's because they have the right systems in place and their leaders all follow it. Their managers are trained against it and their people have come to know, love, and respect it.
Yeah. And it gives you the language to be able to throw that yellow flag on the play too. So it's not just, oh, Jack is showing up as a jerk today. No, hey, Jack, we said that we we keep our customer at the table during our decisions. And right now, you're not thinking about the customer in this decision. I'm hearing you say things like X, Y, and Z. So it gives you that language to be able to say, no, we all agreed to these things, whether that's values at the company level or what you and I call guiding principles at the team level. So that's more of how do we show up for one another and what do we put at the forefront of how we behave and make decisions and those types of things. If you don't have them for your team, very important to have. So that's the type of thing I'm talking about, where you're sitting around and you're making decisions. All of those things lead back to how do we do that? And when people don't show up in that way, how do we call them out? It gives us these guardrails, these boundaries to live within versus just kind of going rogue.
Well, until these companies decide to mature or up-level the systems that they're using, like get it out of the forced ranking, for example. I mean, you were telling me just the other day about a situation that you encountered around a company that's still using that, which is one of the most antiquated ways of measuring performance and figuring out who gets promoted and who doesn't.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and it's a large Fortune 500 company, so it impacts a lot of people. If you don't know what forced ranking is, essentially, I think at the basic level, you're given a bucket of money. You can rank people in a certain way. Let's say you have 5 people. You can only rate 3 of those people, 2 of those people at a 5, 2 out of 3, 1 out of 2, whatever the system is that you're given. Even if you have 5 people at a 5, you have to choose to de-rank somebody, and that impacts their promotion, their salary, all of those things. It's the opposite of fair. And I know some operations aren't fair, but that's demoralizing. And you're then not only to employees, but as leaders, your back's against the wall. You don't have any, you can't. And what I see leaders do in that instance, and this was probably one of the most eye-opening conversations for me I had in that arena, was I was sitting with a leader who was going through her rankings. And she said, I don't know what I'm going to do, because this person that I'm being forced to rate at a 3 really deserves to be rated at a 4 or 5. And I'm only allowed to give promotions at 4 and 5s. And I think I'm going to lose this person. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to forego my promotion and I'm going to move myself from a 5 to a 3.
And in other places, that same response that you would get from the employees is when they feel like they don't have a career path, because there isn't a career path.
Right.
They feel like they're not being given development opportunities, or they're not, we're not tapping into that part of intrinsic motivation, because nobody's sitting there saying, gosh, what do I need to do to make sure Whitney continues to stretch and grow and push herself? She wants to be a director one day, but there's a couple of things she needs to do. If there's not somebody who's paying attention to that, nothing will change. And it is demoralizing. You're going to leave and go somewhere where they're going to either hire you as a director, or that they say, maybe we'll build you into one. Just come in. We're going to train, develop, coach you to where you need to be. And until these companies figure out the basic blocking and tackling of, modern ways to manage and develop people, I don't care if you have them sitting right at the foot of your desk every single day. You're not going to be able to, you can monitor all you want, but you're not going to be able to up-level performance to get different results.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about in corporate baggage, we've talked about influence a lot, because there are, to be honest, a lot of things that are out of our control, even as leaders, employees, and as leaders. Mm-hmm. So influence becomes a big factor. So if we're going to claim the baggage here and repack it a little bit, what do you think is most important for leaders to be thinking about how they can influence that performance conversation at the highest levels?
Well, let me make sure I'm understanding your question. Yeah. How to get the systems and processes changed.
How to influence the systems, because that's what we're saying. Okay. It's not just the conversation, it's the systems that support those.
Right. So every individual leader has to work within whatever the performance management system is that their company requires.
Sure.
But they can have sort of their sub-strategy underneath of that says, okay, I got to fill out these documents and forms and check these boxes and enter it into a system. Cool. But what I'm really focusing on is, how am I doing? What's my system for giving feedback? What's my system for reward and recognition? What's my system for training versus coaching versus mentoring? What's my system to stretch people? What's my system to take things off their plate if they're overwhelmed. Every individual leader can create that for themselves. It doesn't have to be arduous. It can be done in a very simple notebook, but you've got really cool online tools like OneNote or something, Evernote, something that would allow you to capture my interactions with Whitney, what I think she needs next, and what kinds of help I'm going to offer her and what her next stretch assignment's going to be. Every individual leader needs to be able to have their own system to then be able to say, look, this is how I take care of my people. And here's other things that are preventing me from being able to keep them, support them, what have you. You cannot rely on the company system to be the panacea or the end all be all for how you're going to keep people engaged, motivated, and progressing in their career. So every individual leader has the capability, and this is stuff that I work with my coaching clients all the time, is how do you set up a system that works for Whitney, works for Catie, works for Owen, or whoever the person is, to be able to kind of manage the performance of their team, regardless of where they're sitting, remote, hybrid, or in the office.
And that's something that we see all the time in the study of high performers, is despite those barriers, because they'll always exist. There'll always be barriers in the organization.
Every organization.
Despite those barriers, they overcome them with their own systems, processes, things like that. What we're not saying is go create all your different things and don't follow the system. Follow the system, but complement it with those tools. What are your carry-on essentials?
I love it.
What are those things like OneNote or like Trello, or how are you monitoring? There are so many free tools. So if you have some tools you use for performance or one-on-ones, drop them in the comments, share them with us. But those are some that we love. I mean, I love Trello that's more of a static type of use. But it really helps keep track of things. OneNote's great if you're using Microsoft, but even like 90.io, if you want to use stuff around EOS, if you've read the book Traction, it depends on how specific you want to get around those. But there's so many approaches and tools to be able to use to do that.
That's right. At the end of the day, whether you've done the RTO, you're working hybrid, you're working fully remote, every leader is responsible for having their own system for how they manage and monitor performance. And do not rely on what the company gives you. You really need to rely on your own ideas and your own system for how you want to take care of your team. So
people are complicated.
They are.
The only thing that should be in your baggage is
your paycheck.
Yeah.
Your paycheck.
See you next time. Thanks for listening. If you have some corporate baggage you want to unpack or something you took away from the conversation, drop it in the comments.
Find our social links in the description. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share these episodes.